Ladies and gentlemen, Violent Games here. We got another games discussion for you guys today. Sorry, I took a drink. I'm very thirsty today. I don't know why. I cannot stay hydrated. It's been the most difficult struggle of my life. Anyhow, complexity. I think complexity in video games does nothing but add value to games 9 times out of 10. And I wanted to go into the reasons why today in this video, and also go into maybe some devil's advocate arguments as well. So let's jump straight into it. I think the first and most obvious point that complexity adds to a game's overall replay value. You get a lot more out of a game that is complex than a game that is simple. If you can experience a game in its entirety in a short amount of time, it is very unlikely that players are going to keep replaying that game. So, for example, Dishonored, Death of the Outsider versus Dishonored 2. You know, guys, in my review of Death of the Outsider, I actually liked the main campaign a bit more than Dishonored 2, and I held it in high regards for that reason. However, I have way more hours into Dishonored 2, and I've generated much more content for that game simply due to the fact of how complex it is. You had a more complex set of powers and a much more complex set of play styles, and you had 2 different protagonists that had also multiple ways to go throughout the world, lethal and non-lethal, that would affect their dialogue, adding another layer of complexity, and adding different endings, another layer of complexity. And if that wasn't enough complexity, you could replay the game with both power sets as either character, adding another layer of complexity with more bone charms and more equipment to start. So there's just a lot more to do in that game, and it just adds so much more value. You're going to have more people talking about your game because not everyone's going to experience all that content or discover it for themselves. There's just a lot that complexity adds for games in general, so you can kind of see where I'm coming from. Both single-player and multiplayer games, I think, apply to this. Like, think about multiplayer games in general. Like, the most successful multiplayer game right now, I think, is still League of Legends to this day. If I could be wrong, because I think last year it was, but who knows? Everything can change. But think of how complex League of Legends is. Like, you could not sit down for a week and learn that game within its entirety, and I feel like that amount of discovery just adds so much to that game that people just keep coming back over and over again. And what's crazy about League of Legends in general is that the business model is that it's free to play. You can just go in there and start playing. There's nothing stopping you, but their business model is predicated on skin sales, and their game is built from the ground up to keep you entertained by the gameplay loop itself and make you invested in your characters and make you want to buy these cosmetics so you can pimp yourself out. The same can be said for me playing Rainbow Six Siege. I will totally Barbie doll up my characters because I just love the amount of complexity in that game. I always feel like I'm learning something new when I play that game, and that sense of discovery just makes you want to keep coming back to a game and experiencing it over and over again, experimenting with your play styles, experimenting with different weapons, and all of this just adds so much to a game's replay value. So one thing I think gamers overlook as a whole very often is how games can affect our mental health. I think games, we're going to learn more and more over time how they affect our mental health, but the way I view it right now is that video games can either really help or harm your mental health depending on how often they utilize critical thinking. And what adds to critical thinking is how complex a game can be. The more you can accomplish, do, experiment with in a game, the more you can utilize the creative faculties in your brain. And science has shown us the more you utilize these things, the better it is for you. It's very similar to working out. You know, your muscles, the more you use them, the stronger they become. The same can be said for our brain and overall mental health. So let's think about some games that could be very helpful to our mental health and very harmful to our mental health based on their capacity to make us think creatively. So Call of Duty, I think, is the worst example of a game. Like, honestly, you shouldn't play Call of Duty for more than an hour a day if you even consume that game, because it's just stupid. Like, I have to be completely honest with you. The game is, like, mentally dumb. You basically kind of just run around a tiny map The spawns are random, so you get killed often. There's no footsteps. You can't really utilize any real-life tactics to be successful in Call of Duty. It's just about reacting as fast as you can to the person in front of you, using the lightest weaponry possible to get the ADS faster and all that jazz, and taking a and even mindless to the point that the game doesn't even let you aim for yourself. There's like this obnoxious aim assist. Look, I could make a video making fun of Call of Duty and why it's crap and you shouldn't play it, but let's just say it doesn't let you think creatively or present you with any new ideas that haven't been done in a million other games before. Compare that to a game like Rainbow Six Siege, where every encounter you have to think about it. Every move you make is pertinent, and you're constantly learning new different things. You're forming different strategies yourself, and when you utilize that creative thinking in your brain, you're doing a lot for your mental health. Science has shown us time and time again that the way your brain works is very, very analogous to the way you build muscle mass. You know, you work out a bunch, you work that muscle, it gets stronger and stronger. The same can be said for your brain. The more you expose yourself to critical thinking, your brain has to become stronger and stronger to accommodate for that, so that these issues keep coming up. Your brain's like evolved to deal with these issues, to lift that weight. You know what I'm saying? So, as consumers, we need to be very mindful about the games we play and try to look for complexity. Like, complexity should be appealing to us in video games. It shouldn't intimidate us. So I'm gonna, for the next part, definitely tell you about how I think some publishers and some developers view complexity as a negative, and how I think it's more or less right. Alright, now I'm going to speculate on how I think developers kind of have a disconnect with complexity in video games. I feel like certain developers and publishers alike have an issue with complexity, thinking that if they make their game too complex, it's going to make it overbearing for the casual market, therefore they won't sell any copies. I have to really disagree with this in most instances, but in some instances, they can be right. For example, you're never going to see me play StarCraft 2 or Dota, because those games are so freaking complex that if I was to step foot into that community, I would have a terrible time. Because of all those complexities and being aware of those complexities, those players would just take advantage of me before I would even have the chance to learn anything. So in those instances, yes, making your game very complex can be intimidating to new players. So if you don't have a strong casual base for your game, well, like a lot of coppers or something, then you're not going to really sell a lot of copies and maintain a lot of interest. Now, I still think that making your game more complex doesn't exactly associate with the difficulty of a game, and I think some publishers think that, oh, the game's more difficult because it's more complex. That's not true at all. Like, for example, when I was a kid, I thought Fable was a complex game. It's definitely not, but it was the first RPG I had, ever was exposed to. And for the first time, I had to level up my character in a way that adhered to my playstyle for the first time. I had to decide, gee, do I want more health? Do I want to add more damage? You know, am I able to parry properly? Things like that. Actually, I don't know if you can parry in Fable. Look, it's been a long time since I freaking played Fable 1. That was years ago. That was the original Xbox, okay? That was the original Xbox. But you get what I'm saying. I think a game can be infinitely complex, but also appeal to a casual audience. Like, for example, 9 Parchments. Me, Damon, and Taylor have been playing 9 Parchments recently, and that game has a lot of complexities in it. You have a bunch of classes that have subclasses on top of them, and they're so nuanced, and they play completely different from each other in some instances. And that does nothing but add to the value of the game. You can replay multiple times and have multiple different experiences because the parchments rotate and your characters can rotate, and you can pick a different subclass or a different class entirely. And it just adds so much value to that game, again, as a whole. So again, complexity, I still think it's a net positive, guys. I think I really don't have much else to say. I think I've covered enough about complexity. I think it affects your mental health in a positive way. I think it makes games better. It adds longevity to video games. I think we should look for complexity rather than shy away from it. And I want to end this video on a note that try to challenge yourself in video games, guys. Try to learn something from video games. Don't let video games become stale to you. Try to challenge yourself in a meaningful way and see how that goes. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy games a lot more as a medium when you allow yourself and push yourself to the next level. Like, don't stay where you're comfortable. Try to get out there, experiment with some new games, and have fun ultimately. There's a lot of good games out there that are plenty complex and not complex. There's just so much joy to be had out there, ladies and gentlemen, is what I'm trying to say. Anyways, this is Violent Games signing off. Hope you enjoyed this little ramble. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know if you did in the comments section. I always like hearing from you guys. I don't always respond, but I do read most of the comments. So, Violent Games pissing off.